There we go. Okay. So good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
And welcome to our inaugural podcast on leadership and emotional intelligence. Obviously, the first one didn't go ahead on Monday as planned. So we have rescheduled that to next Monday, I think. Is it it's the 10th actually. So in a couple of weeks' time at 11 a.m. So we'll give it a go again. So welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted to introduce our esteemed Genies Career Hub accredited coaches today to discuss leadership and emotional intelligence. Should we kick off with the introductions then? Cathleen,
Yeah.
you want to go first? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
I will. And I always say I'm trying to make it brief, so you have to cut me off perhaps. But yeah, I am Cathleen O'Sullivan. I'm delighted to be here, so thanks for the invitation. And I often call myself a leadership consultant, coach, facilitator. I love the whole shebang. You could summarize it as working with people and meeting them where they are, basically. And I've been in leadership roles myself for quite a few years. Comes to 18 years this year. I'm working globally, predominantly in large, fast changing, matrix structured, complex organizations until I said, you know what, I think I can make a bigger impact coming in from the outside and supporting people this way. So this is what led me onto this path. And I think what distinguishes me from some of my other esteemed peers is that I bring in my German, Irish, British element in a combination. So the German part of me would say I'm no fluff, quite direct, but with a lot of kindness and care and empathy. And that's how most of my clients describe me. And I love to be this way, bringing in a combination of coaching and mentoring and teaching to some extent as well. You asked me about passions before we joined this call. And one of my passions is being on podcasts and hosting podcasts. Another one is red wine, but I'm not going to talk too much about it. Traveling. And I am a mom. And I'd say my son, who's now 4, is my biggest passion and my biggest learning. So I bring in probably a few examples with regards to emotional intelligence and being a mother and all the challenges in particular as a leader that brings as well.
Yeah, no, fantastic, Kathleen. That's brilliant. You finished?
I'm going to pass the baton on to David.
David, off you go, David. Let's hear
I think you've hit my script there, Kathleen, because I was going to say almost the same. Yeah, I think the challenge is, how do you describe yourself? Like yourself, I'm a sort of coach. I specialize in sort of career development and management coaching. I think is probably the best way to describe it. And like you, Kathleen, I came into this from working within a wide range of private and public sector organizations, but then 21 years ago made that big decision. Seems a long time ago, but it's gone by in the blink of an eye to create my own entity, my own enterprise, which is, well, we're here today, and I'm still here to survive to tell many stories and many tales about that. Along the way, I think, I now sort of lead this organization, lead and manage projects and people, got 8 associates working with me. It's a successful, profitable business. It's survived recessions, pandemics. It's here, and I think I'm proud of that. It's interesting hearing you say about, as a parent, I've got 2 sons. They're older, but and I think they, like you, I'm proud of them because they're on their own career journeys. And I think sometimes they say to me, Dad, what is it that you do? And I say, well, I could describe it. I could go on for hours, but perhaps at the heart of it is this thing called emotional intelligence. I think that underpins almost everything that I do, whether it's with individuals or with organizations. That's really at the heart of it. Outside of this, my passions are music, really. I'm a musician, and also write and like nature, walking, and those are my passions outside, which I value equally. I think it's incredibly important to get that balance of yourself, and the things combine, the worlds combine. That's far too much for me. So over to Sheila.
God, what a bar you two have set. Okay, so so lovely to be here, and it's so good to meet you guys. So my name is Tosheela. I mean, my journey into becoming an executive coach is I've worked in large organisations, predominantly healthcare, and you know where I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but you have that light switch moment in your career when you're just like, what am I doing? And for me, the switch into kind of running the HR OD side into coming into the executive coaching space was, I was literally scratching my head, just like, what are we doing? Like, this is mad. This you know, we're being counterproductive here. In what we do as organizations, we run organizations through almost like a method of fear. And I think for me, that was my game changer moment. That set me then down on a pathway of becoming an executive coach, until I just decided, you know what, I just want to do it by myself, because there's so many, you know, as you said, Kathleen, sometimes it's just about making that impact externally rather than internally, because I feel that you're heard more when you come from a different angle. And my company basically means pathway. The word means pathway. You know, we're all set on a pathway. That pathway changes, you know, our home life impacts that as well, as much as, you know, what happens at work. So it's just about making it a better place. You know, I work predominantly at the moment, I'm working in the sports industry quite a lot, looking at executive coaching throughout the sports industry. It's a really interesting space to work in. And I get my passions right. So if you would have spoken to me about 3 years ago, my passions in life would have been reading, going out, enjoying myself. But then I had 2 boys, one after another. So right now my passions are sleeping. You know, healing from scratches. Yeah, like, you know, red light therapy would probably be one of my passions. So yeah, that's me, and that's yeah, that's all about me.
Sleeping is overrated, Tosheela, really. My sons didn't sleep. I've still got the bags under the eyes to prove it.
I just don't understand. I'm in a constant state of recovery. I don't know if you understand that. It's like, oh, like you get over one thing and then it's another. But
And
honestly,
it doesn't get any easier, believe you me.
Well, it's only lasts 20 years a bit. Then they start going out and getting drunk and things. So then it's a different.
it's a different worry.
I'm a monster teenager. Maybe we talk all day on their own path tonight.
So yeah, that's me.
So I'm Orla Smythe. I'm CEO and founder of the Genies Career Hub. I kind of had a bit of an epiphany back in 2015 after a bad marriage breakup that I wanted to do something different. So I'd worked kind of predominantly in sales, recruitment, IT, even working for companies like IBM and Oracle. And I kind of got to a point around the 2015 mark where, you know, I had a bad marriage breakdown, and I just needed to change things. I was a single mum of a son with ADHD, so he was quite neurodivergent anyway, and he has complex needs. So I set on a path really to kind of, I wanted to do I didn't want to do the whole sales traveling around because I didn't have the family support. So I had to think of something that I could do whilst being a mum and not having much family support. And then obviously the neurodivergence comes into it as well. So I applied for a role as an IPS employment specialist with one of the NHS trusts in Northampton, Northamptonshire Healthcare Foundation Trust. And I was successful there to become an IPS individual placement support consultant. So for many years, I helped people with enduring mental health and a forensic background get back into work. And I found that very rewarding. And I think whilst on that kind of discovery or on that path, I was looking around, and, you know, there was lots of different government initiatives. There was lots of disparate things, services. But I suppose there was nothing that was all in one. And really, that's kind of where I started to envision, you know, a one-stop shop, you know, solution, where, you know, there would be mentorship, there would be guidance, and, you know, lots of different resources available that people to try and take the complexity out of looking for work, and to try and handhold people really, you know, from one step to the very end. Because what I noticed was there wasn't a lot of mentorship, and everything was kind of all over the place. So this is where kind of Career Genies initially, which is what it became in 2020. And that was me as a career coach, kind of helping different people, you know, from any stage in the career right up until exec level, to really trying to create something that would be an end-to-end cohesive platform. And then basically in 2024 we've had the beta version of what really was my vision, kind of right back as far as kind of maybe 2018. So it's slowly evolving, and I'm proud to say that we've now got 22 accredited coaches on the platform. We've built, you know, career development, artificial intelligence tools. We've got corporate programs that we're hoping to launch now with our esteemed coaches. And, you know, I think if we can get this right, I think this could be very, very meaningful and very, very productive platform, you know. And obviously it's still in its infancy, so this is kind of still early days for us all, but I think if we can try and get the momentum going on this, we might be able to create something really, really beautiful, really, really good. And that's kind of where I am and what I'm hoping to achieve. So that's a little bit about me. So shall we delve in? Who wants to start to talk about baby leadership and, you know, and emotional intelligence, and then obviously that in the workplace? Should we have a bit of a chat around that before we delve into the questions?
Yeah, sure.
Who wants to jump in? Who wants to start?
Happy to start. And
Brilliant,
you know why I'm happy to start? Yeah, I haven't spoken for a few minutes now. I was listening actively.
Yeah,
No, joking. But actually I ran a session yesterday that was strongly focused, or had a big element of emotional intelligence in it. And it was with younger emerging leaders. And that's a group of people I really love to work with, because you can shape, you can, you know, step into the values, into the beliefs, and really, really support individuals understanding what does leadership mean for them, and how can they have therefore a positive and impactful impact on others, which I believe is strongly needed in this slightly crazy world we operate in at the moment. And what was a real aha moment for them was when I showed Manfred Katz de Vries model, where you basically see two graphs. One graph is a line that goes upwards with regards to emotional competence that's required the more you progress as a leader. So you start out perhaps more as a technical leader or expert, and then slowly but surely you may take over, and I would say traditional leadership responsibility. What do I mean by traditional? You have teams grow, you step up in a very hierarchical manner. And I'm sure, looking at the faces of my colleagues here, we know leadership so much more than that. And the second graph was basically a downward facing line, and that was all about technical competence. And so many people are still, from my perspective, from the experiences that I've had, from observations that I'm making, promoted because of their technical expertise. And what you notice is that despite the fact that emotional intelligence is needed more, that decreases quite often. Because we have learned how to do things. We bring the technical capabilities and skills into the mix. But what we are either not taking time for is to connect with ourselves, our own emotions and those of others, build those relationships, be able, I wouldn't call it manage emotions, I'm not sure how possible it is, but somewhat regulate our emotions to be better for others as well. And so therefore we trust our skills and everything we have done so far and how we have been doing it. And research has also shown that the higher up you get, the lower emotional intelligence becomes. Because as I just said, there are a few reasons. We don't take the time for it because suddenly there is a different kind of pressure, goal orientation, deliver up on the strategic priorities and whatnot. So we may lose track of it. But also we become, if we are not intentional about it, more disconnected from people across the organization. So we are losing touch literally with them. And there are plenty of other reasons why we may be not focusing on emotional competence building and intelligence. I think it's utterly important that we shift our thinking and that we start, if we are not doing that already, to help people understand the importance and help them understand how to develop emotional intelligence as well.
That's a very good point, actually, Kathleen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would echo that. It's interesting that I think probably the best way to gauge sort of trends is what sort of client organizations are asking for, really. And I think of one case example where a leadership and management program like yours, Kathleen, which is predominantly aimed at, like they call it, aspiring leaders, in its original format about 8 or 9 years ago, had a little bit of a mention about emotional intelligence. There was a little part of it. And then I have a look at it now, and it's literally been recommissioned in the last couple of weeks. It's expanded so that now emotional intelligence is almost at the core of that. My concern is, as you say, is that if we're embedding it with aspiring leaders, what I'm keen to do is to go back and work with those middle leaders and managers, and also with the senior leaders and managers, and say, look, we're doing it here. Where are you with this? Some of those people have been on that journey over that period of time and hopefully remember it. But actually, some of my concern is, are we giving sufficient to those senior leadership teams and, you know, exec level? I'm not sure. Have I got sufficient evidence to say yes, we are? I'm not 100% certain, if I'm honest. I think it's interesting when you get asked to go back in and do seminars on these sorts of things, and sometimes the responses I get surprise me, because I don't get that same level of sort of understanding that sometimes I get from those aspiring leaders groups. It's really interesting, actually, and that's just an observation rather than a scientific fact, I think, really. You know?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with everything that's being said, and I love the research aspect to it. So I would guess from my experience, so I have had a long time working with exec leaders in the healthcare settings. And what's really, really interesting to see there is you've got, let's say, one of the top surgeons in the UK. Okay, so they're very used to that, like their role of work is to deal with someone that's predominantly knocked out on the table, and they're operating on that person, right? So they've got the technical knowledge coming out of their ears there. So they would be fit to lead on a commissioning role. However, you put that personality type into an organization where they now have to lead a team to work towards that one goal, it just doesn't work. So the argument there is, technically we need that technical capability to be able to do that role, but you know, they just have to kind of get on and do it. And when you're working with clinicians, I don't know if any of you have worked with clinicians, wow, like a lot of the time they think that what we do is like hug trees and sing to plants, but I don't know if you've ever had that come back at you before. But the importance of targeted executive coaching, I think, at that level is possibly where you know, I've worked a lot in that space. It's around, you know, they're not built with the emotional intelligence because they've had to almost suppress that to get job number one done in general. So it's about how do we bring that self-awareness out of them and deal with it. And a lot of the time where we've commissioned workshops just haven't worked because you're dealing with a systematic problem. And it's about, I think executive coaching really needs to come into the spotlight here around embedding this culture within certain industries that are quite difficult, because I think without executive culture, without holding people accountable, and without that continuous targeted handheld support that you spoke about, Orla, you know, you're not going to get the outcomes in that demographic that you were talking about, David, around the people that are already doing. I think where we go wrong is we don't bring executive coaching into the spotlight at all. It's mainly focused around organizations. So organizations are stood there going, well, actually, this is amazing, but how do we embed it? Do we just do workshops? But I think what we do is pivotal to making that work in the industry. And that's just from what I've kind of seen.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Right. I agree with that clinician analogy.
It's really difficult because the way that I see what we do as a collective is our job is to rewire the brain is what we do. We take away those thought pathways that have been engineered for X amount of years, and we introduce different ways, and that you know, over time that rewires that pathway of thinking. I think if we
new neural pathways.
and if we are able to do that as a collective, the impact that we could make in this area would just be phenomenal.
And I think there are two key challenges, one of which you have mentioned with regards to stepping back and stepping into that space of emotional intelligence. The one that I hear nonstop and it makes me smile is, who's got time for this? Right? I need to deliver. Here's my massive to-do list. Now you want me to have great conversations, to actively listen, to reflect upon my own behaviors and emotions, and much, much more. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I want you to do. And I can explore that a little bit more later, how and what can help here. And the second piece is around, and Tosheela, you mentioned it, it's perceived as tree hugging, fluffy, spiritual, right? And I think the penny starts to drop in many, many individuals that it is essential. Call it tree hugging, call it spiritual. You can give it any name, but in the end, it comes back to connecting with yourself and others. And how you behave and how you show up in this world. And actually, it has implications, very positive implications, performance, engagement, turnover rates in terms of not losing people all the time, and so much more. Speaking about well-being, mental well-being, and so on. The list is lengthy. So we've got to start to prioritize it. So therefore, I'm really with you. Where do we start? Senior leaders have to be involved, execs have to be involved. And the last thing I would say about it, and you notice I'm passionate about this, let's meet people where they are. You know, don't throw exec coaching or leadership coaching or any coaching at people. We had a lot of conversations about, so do we do clean coaching, non-clean coaching? What do people need? Do they need some advice? Do they need a buddy, a partner, a mentor, a coach, according to the ICF and all of these official boards? What do they need? And let's focus on that. And that means being able to flex as well in our approach.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's about the flexing aspect, and it's also about kind of getting corporate organizational buy-in. I think that is the main thing, because the leaders have the capability to adapt and to bring it on if corporate give them the space to do it. If the organization can. So when you're speaking about like the time, it is about having the tick box of the organization understanding and embedding that this is a really, really important part of the bigger picture. Let's buy it in, let's commission it in. And I think that is where the main blocker, I find, a lot of the time is, because it's that vicious circle, isn't it? Haven't got the time, make the time, but where do I then get, how do I bring those efficiencies in? So I feel it. And I as well, I'm super, super passionate, because emotional intelligence, it's not just about getting the job done as well. It's the impact that people actually have on lives of their employees. You get emotional intelligence wrong at work, that person's going home to what could be not a great situation. We're not going to be resilient all through our lives, and you don't know how that's landing. You don't know the impact and how it takes, and then it leads on to the kind of studies that I've done around suicide rates in the industry. Emotional intelligence, it can literally be pinpointed to how you're dealt with. Is what I've personally found. It's just at the forefront of everything that we do, and some people don't even have the capacity to understand it. It's about how to, working specifically, as you said, with people on what level they're at is so, so important. But I honestly don't think we can do it without having people like us literally come into an organization and offer bespoke packages, which is kind of what you've created here on this platform, which is what I think is so refreshing to be part of the discussion.
I think another point is sort of soft skills as well, because it's sort of like just indicating that they're not important. They're not as important as the technical stuff. And that's a perception we need to break. And also, I think, emotional intelligence, we all understand it, but it still isn't sort of universal language. You don't hear it. We're hearing things like well-being, time, and the sort of this, I think our understanding of the complexities of mental health. Even now, those things are becoming public conversations. You know, that people are opening up much more to talk more about these things. But I still don't think that emotional intelligence is fully understood.
Yeah.
And that's we're all maybe guilty of not explaining it clearly enough, or feeling that it's a world that we belong to. But that's the issue, because this should be for everybody. You know, I'm a great advocate that this affects each and every person on the planet.
Yeah.
And a more emotionally intelligent world, we wouldn't quite probably not be seeing a lot of the things that are happening in the world if emotional intelligence was, you know, and it goes right back to where is it introduced in schools? You know, all of those. There's a whole piece around that. I think that it shouldn't be something that you suddenly come across this terminology when you enter a workplace.
Very true, David. That
Even
is
then, it's not really understood. So there's scope to go far deeper with this and much younger. But that's, you know, it's fascinating, isn't it? It really is. And we'll continue to sort of state our cause, but I think it is a really important thing to be able
that's such a fantastic point. Oh my God, I didn't, you know, you've just hit a light bulb with me, because you actually at school, you're told what to do, you're told how to act, you're told when to let loose, you're told what is, you know, expected of you, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're only doing what you kind of know. Oh, that's such a good point. I mean,
we talk about, you know, IQ. It's just sort of like, oh, how intelligent are you? You know, you've got an IQ of, or you've got a grade, and it's almost like the way that we are judged is on those sort of percentage marks, and yet EQ is such more of a variable, and it's not discussed in the same terms. And I just wonder why. You know, what you want to do is to speak to government ministers, education ministers, and say, look, let's have this conversation, because surely there's a space for this, because everyone benefits from this.
No, definitely.
Everything benefits from it.
And in some countries, you see some changes where it is implemented, where because of Tosheela, coming back to the system still says you have to have certain marks, and this is how you have to assess the pupils, right? And at the same time, schools independently decide what kind of subjects to bring in, and emotional intelligence starts to be one of them. Breathing and breath work, financial understanding. I mean, we could go on and on. But it's almost like pockets of experimentation. And I wished we would talk about this more. We could learn so much from Scandinavia, for example, with regards to that. And we don't look enough into those other markets, which comes back to leadership. Are we looking outside of our own silos enough without this feeling of, oh no, I can't spy, or no, then they might want information from us, which is part of emotional intelligence, my self-awareness, and how I deal with the knowledge and the insights I gain from it. And I think there we have, I'm with you, a big challenge. And having said that, I think, and that's applicable to any part of society, that there is something we all can do. Small steps taken consistently can make a huge difference. So we can, I'm going to be blunt, moan and complain and talk to the system about what they need to do differently, or we think about, okay, what's something I can do?
Yeah, exactly.
So to give you a very brief example, in my household, and Tosheela, you may have had a few of those challenges, with a 4-year-old, the last year was beyond challenging. One tantrum followed the other. And coming back from holiday feels like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. I need a holiday now. And you know what? When my little one has a tantrum, I have a choice. I go nuts. I start to scream. I start to tell him what not to do, to be quiet now, to go into his room, which sometimes happened as well. I'm not perfect, right? Or I can step into my own space for the moment, which I can do through breathing, for example, through literally saying to him, I need 5 seconds. As to whether he listens to it is a different story. But to kind of gather myself for a short moment, collect myself in this moment. And then what I do more often is to offer him a big hug. And then to give him this hug and to simply breathe together with him. And there's nothing else that's needed. And suddenly I can literally feel his heartbeat calming down, and he is calm, and now we can have a chat. Now, this is nothing new. This takes me probably 10 seconds. If I let the tantrum go on and on and on, it will take much longer and it will have repercussions in terms of conflict, bad feelings. He will remember this moment and so on. Now let's translate that into organizations, into formal leadership. Does it really take us more time, right? To be emotional intelligent, to step into the space where we meet others where they are? I think that question is answered with it. And the other part is around what are some of the small steps that we can take to make a difference and to pass on some more effective and positive behaviors that others, because of authority bias, will look at and hopefully in their own authentic way copy perhaps and take away.
Learn from it. Yeah, take on board some of these strategies. It is very, very true. Kind of learned behavior, positive learned behavior.
Yes,
One example. Sorry, Sheila. Over you.
I'd say exactly what you've just spoken about there. I used to talk about it as like championing the behaviors that you kind of want to see. So oh my god, I wish that my we need to take this conversation off of this podcast, but I usually get a scratch on my face with a 2-year-old. It's just like, oh, it's wild. But I do talk like that. What you're talking about is literally championing those behaviors that you want to see in others, because a lot of the time, especially in big organizations, there's a lot of what I've seen is there's a lot of I want them to do that, but within my own home team I don't feel safe to do that because it's not going to land very well with X, Y, and Z, or the leader's not going to like it. So it is around, but if you want to see that change, you have to positively bring that change forward. Let's drop the competitiveness, let's drop the what if, let's drop the gatekeeping almost, and then just be that person that you would want to see. And then usually you see like the changing of behaviors that way. But it goes so much deeper than that, as you both have highlighted, and all are like people are just at different stages on that journey. But I do think
on the organization as well. I mean, having been part of your organization for a number of years, I mean, the leadership there was very, very toxic. And trying to get to a point where you're having these open and refreshing conversations was very difficult. And particularly bad leaders that wouldn't learn, even when they were capability managed, to try and help them change to become better kind of versions of themselves, kind of led an awful lot, particularly in the department I was, to a lot of people actually leaving the organization, good people leaving the organization that really couldn't go to their supervisors or to the higher senior management team within the organization to try and see any kind of change take place. And I've seen a lot of toxic cultures where they don't from the head up try to do this down, implement it down, and it is a sad thing to see, in some of these kind of bigger organizations. I know the Thurapit and the challenges faced in these kind of roles, particularly within the NHS, is quite difficult. As you mentioned about some of the clinicians and having a particular technical skill, but maybe not having the other kind of softer skills around it. So
absolutely,
there's an awful lot of change needs to come about, and these conversations I think are only the start.
100%. I mean, there's a lot as well in the sports industry where you've got absolute pure talent. We're talking in elite leagues. However, the way that they're dealt with by coaches, perhaps, there's always coach the coach, may not bring out the best in them. It might actually make them a little bit worse before they walk out on court or pitch or arenas. So it's just the smallest change that you can make that will make the biggest difference. But unfortunately, I just see it so much in especially high performing and high delivering teams. But I think that's something that I definitely seen. But if you look at F1, for instance, sorry, going off tangent here, and you look at how Wolf manages his team, so he speaks a lot around, well, if someone doesn't change that wheel on time in that fraction of a second, then that actually impacts on me as a leader. Why have I not facilitated the space that person could speak about? And you can't get you can't get higher pace than the F1 in my views. Like it's crazy. Obviously you've got A&E as well, but when you're doing work in F1 space, you really do see that the leaders do take that "it is on me" mindset, and how that alleviates the team, which is why I think they're so efficient.
Yeah, no,
Personally.
that makes sense.
Yeah, there is very much like, if the cleaner, you know, hasn't mopped that floor correctly and there's an oil slippage there, that then leads back to the leader. Why was that not picked up through the chain up to the leader? So there is that mindset as well, and I think if we adapted that, a lot of services would run just flawlessly, I would say.
No, it's a very good point.
I wished, and Ola, maybe I can find it after and we can add it to the show notes. I would find that story, Tosheela, you may remember it, where two surgeons at the Great Ormond Hospital were really frustrated about the processes, the lack of productivity, the lack of efficiency, the team didn't work together.
Yeah.
And obviously that brings real risks, right?
Mm.
But they were also Formula One enthusiasts and watched Formula One together quite often. And
That's it, yeah.
decided to get in touch with the, at this time, top leadership team at Formula One, watching the pit stops and everything and how they work together, and brought those elements back into the theater, basically.
Yeah.
And therefore could make massive improvements. The details, I will find them again, and Tosheela, you may have them, worthwhile sharing.
Yeah.
And there was also that strategy that you're talking about that was brought into, you know, the ER functions as well. So how does emergency response work in that way? And it actually, like, at the core of what they do, obviously there's the efficiency and the being very good at what you're doing and the talent, but it's how you lead a team that is emotionally intelligent to give them that superior that superior advantage, which is what in competition you're looking to do anyway. That is what they look at. So yeah, no, yeah, I'm very, very aware of that. It's an incredible study, and what you can literally lift it and put it into any organization, but you just need buy-in.
I think this is the biggest thing, is the buy-in, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And if there is a platform where we showcase that would be incredible.
But I think it's having these crucial conversations as well, guys, you know, so hopefully, you know, inspiring leaders or people in these kind of functions within the business can realize, you know, that, you know, there's so much that they're missing out on to get that team, you know, high performing, you know, stop people leaving the business, you know, higher productivity levels, and, you know, emotional well-being and happy employees, a productive employee, all these kind of things that they can tap into. And I think things are changing, though, slowly but surely. I think things are. And it's these kind of discussions, I think, that, you know, get people thinking about what, you know, what needs to, you know, happen within themselves as well, you know, and then obviously what they can implement and try and encourage around them. And it's exemplifying those behaviors too, I think, you know, because at the end of the day, we kind of, I suppose we become what we surround ourselves by and with as well.
Yeah, I don't know about any of your experiences, but my experience is, you know, when I'm kind of putting emotional intelligence at the forefront, or possibly kind of introducing it into a session, I think people kind of sigh and, oh God, but I don't really care about, you know, how so and so's feeling. You know, they're paid a job. When they walk in, when that clock goes off, they should really switch in. And I'm like, no, oh, hold on a minute. You know, emotional intelligence is actually being more self-aware about you. Because as a coach, we've got to be emotional intelligent. We can't be charged before we go to a client. You know, we need that kind of barrier. I call it like a buffer zone before we walk in. So it's about kind of, first and foremost, it's looking at you as a client, as to, you know, making you more self-aware. And I think people don't really see that vantage point. I think people see emotional intelligence as you pandering to other people's moods and feelings, but actually it's the
misconception, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a misconception, I think, wholly. And then when they realize it's about them, they start to get more interested.
That's an interesting point, because I think I can think of two situations in my career when I walked into those opportunities, and if I was honest with myself, I knew it wasn't right. Both of them ended in the wrong way, but at the heart of it is because I sensed that the sort of culture within those organizations just wasn't.
They weren't ready to hear maybe.
It there was a toxicity to the culture, and you know, as you say, it's not. I like the point you make there, Tosheela, about, you know, I'm not interested in what other people think. They're here to do a job. But I don't think we can argue with how we feel about how we go to work, because how we feel in our waking moments about the day ahead, how we feel on the Sunday night before a Monday, if Monday's our first working day of the week, and so on. Can't really argue with that. And no matter how we might deny that in ourselves, it comes to us loud and clear. And at some point, so I think that's an interesting way to broach emotional intelligence, that it's not the soft and fluffy stuff. In fact, to develop emotional intelligence is one of the most challenging journeys all of us will ever go on, really, continue to stay on. And I think that's, again, that picks up on an interesting theme, because there are implications for just each and every one of us. So I think it's a really interesting point that you made there, Tosheela.
And could I build on that for a moment? Because both of you highlighted something so meaningful and important. And it's also good that we are stepping into the space of defining emotional intelligence more. And that is the part around being aware of your own emotions. And I want to highlight that that doesn't mean you always have to be the greatest person in the room, feeling great, feeling upbeat, feeling positive, being super optimistic. This is not what it is about. This is about being tuned in to what's going on for you. And sometimes, well, it's fairly crap and it might not feel that good. And to also understand, okay, what does it mean now to how I approach the day, how I'm being with my team? Is there anything I can do to start to regulate that? And it might just be not the greatest day. So how am I going to get through the day? And I think there's also a lot of noise around, for example, authenticity. And I love the noise and I dislike the noise around it, because authenticity doesn't mean you spill all the beans and you share everything about your personal life. Authenticity is, can you be, or can you show up as yourself with your values, with your beliefs, even talking vulnerably about, this is not the greatest day I'm experiencing. So if I'm a bit withdrawn today and I'm not in touch all the time with you guys, not your fault. Please approach me still. I'm here for you. That's authenticity. You don't mask that you may have a day that feels more challenging, for example. So again, emotional intelligence, yes, be in touch. It gives you loads of insights to what's going on for you, where it might come from, what you can do now going forward, including talking to somebody simply about what's happening there. And it can help people understand you better as well and build stronger and deeper connections. And I find that very important.
That's a very, very good point, actually, Kathleen.
We talked in the prep meeting for this podcast about vulnerability, if you remember, and
oh yes,
I think
we did. Yeah.
very, very closely to what you said there, Kathleen. It's not about we can't all feel every day, of course we can't, but it's like just that willingness to sort of share a little bit more of ourselves. And certainly do an exercise on the leadership program when I just get them to think about someone really impressive who they've worked with, so like an effective manager, an effective leader, and I say also going to just let that person come to your mind, and then I'm just going to ask you to sort of reflect and discuss it between you and share your experiences of that person. And almost all of the components of the feedback are centered around emotional intelligence. They talk about leaders who have been transparent, open, approachable, have demonstrated vulnerability, have admitted mistakes. And then it's a brilliant precursor to saying, well, actually, this is what we're going to be focusing on in the following session, etc. And it's a really nice way to sort of highlight what it is without starting with the label, which I think the label itself can be a little bit, oh, what is that? You know, and it's a nice lead in to something that we can all think of those people. You know, you can do it the other way. You can see the worst manager leader you've ever worked with. You get a different story. But again, you still get the emotional intelligence components not being exhibited in that way. Yeah. So it's another approach perhaps to being able to introduce this to an organisation or to an individual.
Yeah. Really good.
It actually brings up another reflection, because in one of the first podcasts that I've ever been on as a guest, I was very blunt about myself. I said years ago when I started out in management, I used to be a real cow. And I still stand by that.
Mm.
I wasn't the greatest manager at all. I was myself so focused on delivering up on the targets and making sure German efficiency, right? We get the job done within the time frame and whatnot. I could sense, so speaking of this important part of self-awareness, right? I could sense when other people were put off by my behavior. I could sense when people didn't dare to approach me and ask some difficult questions. And I literally pushed it to the side. So I had the awareness, but I was so great at just blocking it. You know, it's not something that I need to deal with now. I have more important stuff to do. Really arrogant approach, basically. And I think in hindsight, and throughout all the years of my own growth and development and working with coaches and therapists and mentors myself, I think what I realized was I was very anxious
Mm.
of facing the reality and
Mm.
looking into that mirror, because it means you get some critical feedback.
Mm.
Nobody likes to be seen as a person, you know, who makes mistakes, who doesn't behave in the most role model-y way. And I was really nervous about it because I haven't grown up in a way where feedback was provided constructively and openly. It was often associated with bad conflict. And it's something I had to relearn. And nowadays, it's a big part of emotional intelligence for me to be aware, to let other people add to that awareness as well, and do that vice versa, so that we can maybe not remove all the conflicts. Conflicts can be super helpful, right, if managed well,
Yeah.
but to work together so much more effectively and more openly. And what I keep repeating is to build more trusting and deeper relationships. Because when you work in a team, that's actually fun. That really trusts one another. Work changes. Commitment changes. It's just more joyful.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's okay to disagree. I think that's the point, isn't it?
That is it.
With, so
Yeah.
how comfortable do you feel in
Mm.
disagreeing with what your line manager has said, and how comfortable do you feel expressing that disagreement? And you know, you get those sort of cultural measures, I think, going through, and if you're sensing fear, that you often do, you're sensing hesitancy, and you're sensing that sort of fear of hierarchy, etc. All these things are, and I think, Tosheela, you mentioned earlier about that external. As an external, you can almost be that voice.
Yeah.
You can reflect that. You can say, well, I'm sensing this. You know, I've done this recently with
Yeah.
chief executive of an organization, and they asked for some feedback, and I had to say, well, the reality is you've got a culture of fear.
Yeah.
And he sort of sat back and said, well, I could either say it or I could not. I decided to say it without fear. But this is evident. This is here, you know, and it was just very, very powerful situation. Was he surprised? He was outwardly surprised.
Yeah. I bet. But I guess
I don't think he was inwardly surprised at all.
But you know, like that again, what you just pointed out, the obvious there, David, is actually what organizations are run on. Organizations nowadays, the majority are run on fear. So if you are sick, you will be monitored this way. If you have a bereavement, you have got X amount of time to get over it. If you know, we're again, the other podcast that unfortunately got cancelled, we rescheduled, is around resilience. We're not resilient 24/7. Things happen in our lives which knock us. You know, I could have been resilient for 3 years, but I might have a 6-month period where I do dip. I'm going to be performance managed or capability managed, and you know, organizations are run on fear. However, if we flip that and run emotionally intelligent organizations, we catch the problem at the beginning. So you know, if you are sick, okay, how can we flex? You know, Kathleen, how can we flex to accommodate your need here so that you can still earn your money, but I can support you through the sickness? If you are, you know, not, if you're on a capability process, rather than putting you through a process, let's pinpoint where you need a bit of support here. What's going on? Let's join what's going on in your other world to what's going on here, and how can I facilitate that? And I think you know, to an extent, COVID and lockdowns fast tracked that a little bit, because we showed that we have to look after kids and do the work. It is possible. We don't need to work between 9 to 5 necessarily in most. Some you do, some you don't. So I think it is this running out of fear baffles me, and that was my epiphany in my wake up moment, because I was being told to do things that didn't align with my values, my ethics, out of fearing again, back to that school culture, isn't it? If you do this, you're going to be punished with this. We've literally just copied and pasted that into the corporate world, really. And then
kicking the carrot.
It's ridiculous. And then Kathleen, the things that you've spoken about how do we make that small changes? Well, I think we're doing it within the next generation anyway, right? So you're teaching your son, we're all teaching our children different ways to approach different things. We now know that being neurodiverse could actually lead on to finding something incredible work-wise. Most entrepreneurs are neurodiverse, which is why they see things out of the box. We now appreciate that. We don't punish that. We don't put that in a box. But I think there's so much that we can do. It's about eliminating fear and just bringing in that emotional intelligence into people, because we all can do it, right? Unless you are a clinical psychopath, then that's slightly different. We'll go down a different route there. But the majority of people, I hope, this
a very small percentage, I do believe statistically.
Yeah,
don't do hold positions of power.
Oh yes,
I don't know,
was just
that's a whole different combo. That is.
Some people can't even do the acting, Orla.
That's number 47 sorted then, Orla.
But yeah, no, I totally agree that I think everything that we've spoken about is just so linked, and I think we're in such a lucky position, right? I always say I really, really value, and I'm so grateful to be in the position that I'm in, because I have that vantage point that literally I'd say 98% of the working people don't have. We're able to keep that, right? Because that's what we do. We have to be able to do that to do our job, and we are so lucky that we've got that vantage point. And it's about opening that door for other people to see through, I think, is a big part of our work here.
Yeah, definitely. Education is big.
Really nicely put.
Really lovely, Sheila.
Thank you.
Do we want anything? I know we've gone off a little bit off script. We have some questions. I don't know what time people have on this, so I think we've opened up a whole, discussion on various different, parts of intelligence and leadership in the workplace. Is there anything else anybody wants to highlight, or I don't know what people's timings are like? So, do we want to start drawing to a conclusion, or?
I think there's just scope to just carry this on in
I think so. Yeah, I think we could probably do a part 2, guys.
Do a part 2 and maybe pick a specific theme or some case examples. I think people would be really interested to hear about the work that we're involved in and the impact of that. I think that would be really interesting to be able to share.
That would be good, David. Yes.
You want to share mine and hear yours, because I think that can only help us all, really. And maybe people watching or listening to this would sort of resonate with that. And what I would say is that for people who are in organizations who are feeling not quite in sync with the organization that they're in, it's not probably their fault. It's other things that are going on, and sometimes it can feel quite lonely in those places. And if we're feeling like we have to try and fit in, then something's not quite right. And I think that's quite interesting when you have those conversations as a coaching context and think, there's other issues here, then at least that helps that person manage that situation, even if it's only temporarily. That can really help well-being and welfare. So it's that's just a little thought that came to me as we were talking there, that I thought I'd say.
I mean, what would be incredible, Orla, and I don't know if anyone else is open to it, is if anyone that's listening to this has specific questions that they want us to kind of come back on, then maybe we can take viewpoints from the listeners and then just come back together and just talk those through. I think that would be really interesting.
Really, really good idea, actually, Tosheela. I was thinking on the same wavelength myself. Kathleen, any kind of?
I'm completely with David. I think there's so much food to go deeper.
There really is, isn't there? Yeah.
All practical
so many
steps.
different areas, isn't there?
Yeah. And one topic that Tosheela brought up in the end that I might be worthwhile delving deeper into in the next session is you shared examples around neurodiversity, for example, that the awareness is there, people understand it, and there's so much more awareness, there's so much more data around emotional intelligence, around neurodiversity, and much more. And yet we seem to go in circles in society. We become aware, we try to take steps, and then we go backwards. And neurodiverse people, brilliant. I think we all are somewhat neurodiverse. We're all different. And yet you go through peaks of trying to understand where they come from, how the brain works differently, and so on and so forth. And then we go backwards, and it's strange, and I can't quite understand it. And where do these cycles come from? And there's an interesting talk around control and trying to hold on to control, because what I understand, what I know gives me control, which is strongly connected to emotional intelligence and your awareness of self and what gets in the way of letting go of control, for example, and so much more. So it could be an interesting topic to delve deeper into.
Yeah, no, definitely. Guys, this has been brilliant. It's been really fantastic.
Yeah, fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating.
So I think
next time 2 hours.
Yeah, I think we need to set it up here. I can do it now. So I think we'll tie up here. Is there any takeaways from this? Do we want to kind of reiterate on any points on this one, just for any of the audience listening, so that we can facilitate maybe a second part, maybe even a third part on this discussion?
I was just really pleased that it went in the conversational way that we talked about last week, because I just had a strong sense that that's what it was clear from obviously all of a lot and leading to Sheila left, but it was very clear just from a few minutes in. I thought this is going to work beautifully if it's conversational, because we've got so much experience and perspective to offer, and that it just came to be. It was very obvious that it was going to do, and I, as a viewer, I obviously viewers will say, won't they? But I think there's enough there that will get the people thinking.
Yeah, there's enough to whet people's appetite, I think.
To me, it just lends itself really nice, rather than a presentation on AI and and you could go down that road, of course you can, but I think having professionals just talking about this, and from it's therapeutic anyway, isn't it? I mean, I found that therapeutic myself. So it's from an AI self therapy point, I found that really useful, actually. So.
Likewise, it's been so lovely just having a conversation, mixing with you guys. Actually, it's so nice talking to you. I would absolutely love viewers' questions, so I can regroup with you guys and we could just
that'd be good.
It'd be so good. It's light bulb moments throughout the conversation. I love learning little things here and there, and you've highlighted a couple of things which I just think, Jesus, that's just so right. I think this is going to be.
The whole national curriculum needs to be scrapped.
Oh, completely scrapped and overhauled.
I avoided it, not recorded. But I just don't think it's fit.
Yeah.
There you go. That's
it's definitely not fit for purpose. It's centuries out of date, I think.
Just excludes more than it includes, and
I agree.
So much. People becoming who they really are much more. I mean, think of what you were like seeing yourself compared to what you are now. It's a completely different person sometimes. So it's interesting. Great to work with you all. Really good.
Yeah. So good, guys, and connect with you.
Tosheela. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap this up, guys. We'll post this one, see what people think, and then we'll discuss topics for round 2.
Great.
Great conversation. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time, everyone. Bye.
Bye.